Hello, I'm Bad Vibes. Today's video is about being followed, whether it's in car, on foot, in the store. Either way, it's creepy, and you should always be aware of your surroundings. Also, my voice is a little gone, my throat is sore, and I'm kind of stuffed up. So hopefully this video doesn't sound too bad. And if it doesn't, please leave a like, as I would really appreciate it. And sit back and relax. I've never spoken about this to anyone, apart from the girl who was with me when it happened. We had just turned 18, and it was in the summer. There's this old abandoned bandstand where we would go to drink wine and talk about the future and watch the stars. We went often. I now realize that this was a bit silly of us, but we were young. One night, it would have to be around 2 a.m. A dude dressed in all black walked past the road above us and looked down at us. My friend was creeped out, and I was like, it's okay. If you don't feel comfortable, we can leave. We started to gather our things, and the guy jumped up through the entrance on the other side. The road he was on to the entrance would have been like a 5-minute walk, and we couldn't have been getting ready to leave for longer than 2 minutes. We ran away, and he followed us, chasing us up the steps. It was honestly the scariest experience of our lives. My friend was falling over as she ran because she was so scared, so I put her in front of me so I could keep picking her up. She said she had looked behind us and he was so close. She said if he had reached out with his hand, he would have been able to grab my hoodie and pull me back. We ran for about another 10 minutes. I'm not sure exactly when he stopped following us, but it was so scary. We ran onto the grounds of my old high school with the idea of, if he does do anything, he will be on CCTV. We never drank there again after that night and never found out who he was, but I have to believe his intentions were not good. This happened to me in my 20s, about 5 or 6 years ago. I went out for dinner with my friend. I had left my car at her condo since we carpooled. When we returned to her condo, we part ways. She went into her unit by the elevator, and I walked to my car outside. It was around 11 p.m., and there were a lot of lights around, but I still took the precaution, considering that this wasn't the best part of town. No one else was outside, no cars leaving or coming in. I got in my car and proceeded to drive on my merry way home as normal. I pulled up to the light, and a white SUV pulled up beside me. I absent-mindedly looked around and then looked to my right and made eye contact with the driver. Not sure how long he was staring for, but it was creepy. I suddenly got a cold sweat feeling. I proceeded to drive down the long street, and his car was always beside mine. I noticed that he was matching my speed and trying to look over at me. I ignored it. This went on for 15 minutes down the same street. My house was another 15 minutes away. There were other cars, but they mostly turned into smaller streets. I was nervous the whole time, so I texted my friend and my boyfriend and let them know what was happening, but as of now I was fine, and maybe I was just misinterpreting this. At one point, the street became one lane because of the cars parked on the right side overnight, so the SUV ended up behind me the whole way. I finally made a turn to another main street where there was more traffic. Somehow he kept up and was pretty much tailing me. I called my boyfriend freaking out, almost crying at this point. He told me to stay calm and try to turn on another major street and not be on a small one just in case something happened. We hit an area with construction workers working on the road, so the 2 lanes were closing. I was on the far left. He pulled up to the pylons to my right and rolled down his window. I'm pretty sure he was shouting at me at this point. His lips were moving, but I don't know what he said. He pointed at me to roll down my window. He looked angry and a little deranged. I sped off as soon as the light changed, but he was stuck in that lane because no one was letting him through. I was able to get home safely, and my boyfriend met up with me in the garage. I was shaking, but thankfully it never happened again. When I told this story to my friends, there was questions of, what if there was something wrong with your car and he just wanted to tell you? But there wasn't. No flat tire or open door. Gas cap was intact. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted. I am a young teen. I'm quite small. I'm female, and I have bad anxiety, so I usually keep my head down and stay away from situations. Well, recently I've gotten a bit more chaotic and unwinded a bit, so I've been doing more risky stuff. Anyways, I took my friends to the mall for a girls' day, and we were there from morning to night. My father brought everyone back home, and one of my closer friends decided to stay the night. So we get back to my house, and we put all our new stuff inside and played video games for around an hour. Then I had the brilliant idea to go to the park. My friend agreed, so we got ready, and around this time, it was 12:40, almost 1 a.m. My dad hesitantly let us, but if the park had a closing time, we had to walk the block instead. The park ended up being closed, so we walked around the block. My friend was a bit scared, so she FaceTimed her girlfriend, and we listened to music on our AirPod and got some pictures. 10 minutes into walking the block a few times, my friend got off the phone and we planned on going back. I have to explain what the block looks like. My house is in the middle, the park is in the corner, and a few family friends live near. So we walked down one of the roads one last time, and there was a party going on at one of the houses next to the park. When we originally walked by this park, a boy at the party called my friend emo. So anyway, there was a truck next to the house facing the park, and 3 people were in the truck. One man, in his 30s or so, was still getting in the truck and looked at me for a few seconds. We waited for them to drive by while standing at the park grounds at the entrance, but the truck didn't move. My friend stopped to change her playlist on my phone while I watched the truck. Then after the men in the truck watched us for a few minutes, they pulled into the park inches away from my friend. I grabbed my friend's arm and pulled her, and we ran fast. The truck took a U-turn and started following us, so I ran into a lady's yard with my friend, hoping that they would think that that was our house. They stopped for a little bit and ended up driving past. My friend and I ran back to my house and told my dad, and didn't leave the house until the next morning. A couple days ago, I was walking the dog around my lake at my condominium, like I always do. It was around 6:30 p.m., and the sky was getting a little dark. My dog is a golden retriever, and she's very friendly with other people and dogs. She is 6 months old and rarely barks or growls at anybody. She actually loves being petted by strangers, but she is usually very calm regardless of if people pet her or not. Anyway, we were walking and suddenly I turned around and saw a guy coming out of nowhere. The guy looked odd. He had glasses and he walked nervously. He was still far away from us, so I don't think he was nervous about my dog. As he got closer to us, I just stopped and moved to the side like I usually do when someone's coming up behind us. I do this so they can walk ahead of us, and my dog stops constantly, looking back, moving its tail, looking forward to being pet. But instead, my dog starts getting restless and starts growling nervously while looking at the guy. I try to calm her down and smiled at the guy, trying to be friendly, but the guy just looked at me with a serious face and started reaching for something in his backpack. At this point, my dog starts barking, and I just get this bad feeling and shiver down my spine. For a second, I thought, what if this guy had a weapon or something? The guy kept walking, looking at me while reaching his backpack as my dog kept barking at him. I apologized for my dog's behavior and tried to tell him that my dog usually doesn't behave like that, but the guy just ignored me. Finally, he just passes us and my dog stops barking but is still agitated. I just sat down next to her, trying to calm her down, while the guy just gets lost between some houses instead of walking up the lake path, which seemed weird to me. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe the guy just didn't like dogs, which is fine. I try to be really respectful to people who don't like dogs. After he got lost from my sight, my dog just went back to her usual friendly self and we were able to finish our walk. but something really felt weird about this guy, and this encounter has made me feel uncomfortable. This happened to me years ago when I was around the age of 19 or 20 and worked retail part-time at the mall. I was the closing shift that night and left around 10:30 p.m. to head home. I often took the inner streets, first the freeway, which included a small stretch of back road that was usually pretty empty, especially during this time of night. This particular night, I noticed a car about 10 minutes into my 30-minute drive home going the same way as me, and at the time didn't think much of it. As we were approaching the stretch of back road that's usually deserted at this time, the driver behind me started flashing his high beams and slowing down and speeding up while tailgating me. I remember feeling panicked, like they might hit my car. Eventually the car pulls up beside me, and now I can see a middle-aged man that's pointing towards the back of my car and then motioning me to roll down my window. I rolled down my window about halfway and he says something about how it looks like my tire is flattening and I'm gonna damage my rim if I didn't pull over soon. I tell him I don't know how to change a tire, but I'm not too far from home, so I should be fine. But he's pretty insistent about it would only take a few minutes and that he would be happy to help. I know something is off because my car seems to be driving fine. I politely say I'm fine, but thanks anyway, and roll up my window. He drives next to me for what feels like forever, but it couldn't be more than a few minutes or so. At this point, something feels so off that I'm afraid to even physically look in his direction. I focus on the road the best I can, and eventually he slows down and moves to get behind me again. After a few minutes, we reached a more populated, well-lit part of town, and I see him make a U-turn. I get home and take a look at my tire, and it's perfectly fine. I have no idea if he followed me from the mall or what the man's intentions were, but I think it's safe to say they weren't anything good. I even had my dad check all my tires the next morning, and the tire pressure on all of them was in the normal range. I still think of that night from time to time, and it makes me nauseous to think about how different things might be today if I decided to pull over that night. I'm a new mom. My daughter means the world to me. This happened to me when she was almost 1 year old. We were in the fruit and veggies section of Fred's. It had been a normal day. Some people waved at her, some smiled, a few others sent kind words her way. My daughter was enjoying interacting with passerbys, but then out of the corner of my eye, I see a man trying to communicate with my daughter. He made sounds loud enough to get her attention, but quiet enough that I wouldn't hear. I only saw it because he was making some weird kissy faces at her as he did it. Something about it felt terribly off. Usually people interact with her while making it very obvious to me, but this guy was making an effort to stay just out of my eyesight while keeping his eyes on my daughter. I've never experienced anything like this before. I was alone and unsure what to do, so I just left this section of the store and tried to forget about it. Later on, while checking out, I saw once more that man. He was right behind me in the checkout lane next to mine, staring wide-eyed with a blank expression at my daughter. I froze. I recalled the cashier asking me if someone was making me feel uncomfortable, but I was so shaken up that I couldn't get the words out. She called an escort for me. An employee walked us out to our car as I manically scanned the row of cars. He loaded my car up as I buckled in my daughter and patiently waited till I locked the doors and drove off to go back inside. Perhaps I was overthinking things, but that sense of terror is something I'll never forget. I'm female. A few years ago, I think I was 21. I was going back home after a party. It was between midnight and 1 a.m., and I had to take the tramway to get back home. When I got in, I didn't feel very safe, because at this hour, there are many people, and a lot of them are either high or drunk. So I put my earphones in and began to listen to music, but I felt that something was odd. You know when you have this feeling that someone's looking at you, but you just can't see them? That's what I felt. So 20 minutes had gone by, and I arrived at my station. There were a few people who stopped there, but I saw a guy looking at me and walking towards me. I get a little scared and try to walk as fast as I could, but I had 1 kilometer to make it home. Plus, there was no one in the streets except me and this guy. It was a residential area. I tried to calm down by telling myself that I was just paranoid. So I looked back and I saw that the guy was walking at the same speed as me. So I panicked and one of my earphones fell as I heard the guy next to me. I froze. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. And then the guy asked me for a cigarette. I told him I had none and he left. It must be silly, but I scared myself for a simple cigarette. Please guys, I beg you, do not run after anyone to ask them for a cigarette, especially at night. This happened a few months ago. I'm a 23-year-old male. I was driving home from a trip to the store while talking to my friend on the phone. It was around 9 or 10 p.m. I pull into my driveway, park, and talk to my friend for a minute while I'm sitting in the car. All of a sudden, the sketchy car pulls up directly behind me. There's no way I could back out without hitting the passenger side of it. It's dark, my driveway lights are kinda dim, and they deliberately turn off the lights of their car when they pulled up behind me, but I faintly spotted 3 guys in it. I'm feeling real creeped out at this point, so I asked my friend, what should I do? We both decided that I should wait it out a bit and see if they would leave. A few minutes go by, and they're still there. Eventually, we figured the best plan of action would be to stay on the phone, calmly grab my bags from my trunk without breaking eye contact with the people in the car, and walk to my door, which is only about 15 feet away. In retrospect, it would have probably been a better idea just to call my parents and ask them to open the door for me from the inside. I stepped outside, then grabbed my stuff from the trunk. The guy in the rear passenger seat of the car cracks the door open, and the guy in the front passenger seat is staring me down. They're definitely assessing if I'm a viable target. I kept eye contact with them, but I felt like a deer in headlights. It felt like ages, but must have been 2 or 3 seconds at most. Suddenly, the guy in the rear shouts something to his buddies along the lines of, "Oh fuck, it's a guy," and they speed away at like 80 miles per hour on a residential street. I was relieved, but mostly confused. I updated my friend and let them know that I was alright, then I walked inside. I'm a male, 5'9", and slightly overweight with a baby face, so I don't exactly come across as intimidating to most people I meet, so I doubt I scared them off because of my appearance alone. I'm terrified to think what could have happened to me if I were female. It legitimately really messed me up. Why am I safe from these things? Meanwhile, my sister and my female friends have no choice but to keep guns in their car, get teeny cans of pepper spray for their keychains, and avoid being alone in general. It's a scary place out there. Whether you're male or female, always be vigilant. I used to think my neighborhood was relatively safe, but now I'm afraid of sitting in my driveway at night. My friend and I are both young females, small petite build. We had been drinking at the hotel and decided to walk the main strip, about a 20-minute walk, at around 9:45. We were laughing, listening to music, and just having plain fun at this point. Now this is when shit started to go south. Out of nowhere, a lady pops out in front of us. She obviously looks like she's on something. She's twitching, walking super funny, and she's on her phone, which is important. So my friend and I step around her because she was initially going the opposite way. Then all of a sudden, she walks past us, going in our direction, and while she's getting ahead of us, she's looking back and speaking into her phone. I for some reason was already feeling kind of uncomfortable, so my friend and I slowed down to let her get more ahead of us, and decided to go down another street, because why not? The lady sees this, speaks into the phone again, and crosses with us. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking that maybe she's uncomfortable and feels unsafe and is trying to use us as cover, but my gut was telling me otherwise. So while she was walking in front of us, she's still frequently looking back and talking into the phone. So we crossed the street again to put some distance between us. This time, the lady almost turns down a street where a man wearing all black walks out in the same direction we were going. The lady stops at this cross and just stares at us, then steps behind some kind of brush. The man went about 300 feet in front of us on the opposite side of the street, and then turned around and walked back to the same street the lady was at. We were speed walking, so where they supposedly stepped off was now out of sight. My friend was local at the town that we were staying in, so she was already calling a friend who lived 2 blocks down to come get us. Around this time, I looked back to see both of them speed walking towards us. At this point, I'm trying to make it obvious that I noticed them by turning around, pointing, and yelling. Luckily, when they were about 2 blocks away, her friend arrived and we sped off. For some context, I'm a female, and this happened a couple years back when I was around 26. This happened in a big city. I was out with my dog, a little chihuahua, headed to a vet appointment. I forget what happened at this time, but it ended up being nothing serious. But I was pretty anxious and focused on getting to the vet as soon as possible. I was wearing a mask because it was in the middle of the worst part of COVID, and I was wearing a t-shirt with my university on it. I suddenly lock eyes with a guy on the sidewalk headed in the opposite direction, and he comes up to me while I'm walking and goes, "You went to this university?" I said yes. He turns and started walking with me along the sidewalk, the opposite way that he was initially headed in. Side by side, he was explaining what a great school it is and how he's in grad school there. Somehow I felt that this was unlikely. He looked 30 plus and didn't seem to know anything about the college, not giving me any details. He starts asking me more questions, and at this point, I'm speed walking down the block and he just keeps walking right next to me. My dog at this point is getting really antsy, and I'm incredibly uncomfortable as I have no clue who this guy is or why he's trying to walk with me on a busy sidewalk. Suddenly, my dog starts to bark and growl at him aggressively, and he doesn't seem to care and just keeps walking with me. At this point, it's been like 5 to 10 street blocks, with me trying to keep my dog from growling and barking, and him asking me questions. I tried to explain that I'm going to a vet appointment, but I was nervous. Eventually he goes, "Can I see you without your mask?" I legit flat out say no, to which his eyebrows go up like he's shocked. He keeps pushing, and I keep flatly telling him no. Then he tells me that he wants to go get coffee with me. I decline it and tell him I have a boyfriend, which I did, and assured him that I'm getting engaged soon. My dog is still flipping out, barking aggressively at him. But finally, after like 10 streets, after he realized I'm taken, dude departs and leaves me alone. Now I know the most likely explanation is the guy thought I was pretty, wanted to ask me out on a date, and he was awkward. But holy shit, please don't follow a young woman down 10 streets who you don't know. It's unnerving, and I still remember this years later. I guess he made an impression. I'm a 22-year-old female and was 18 at the time. In those days, I was a party girl, going out 3 times a week and drinking a lot. That time was wild. I decided to host a party. It was my first party and I rented a space in my village. It was a cabin, on location for events, very cheap for locals. I organized everything with my 18-year-old female best friend. Let's call her Marie. And another friend, also 18, named Rose. We were having fun decorating and preparing the party. I was stressed out that the party was going to be lame. I decided to cope the stress with alcohol. When the party started and most people arrived, I was already tipsy. I invited people I knew from middle school and high school and some friends I made in college. Even though no one knew anyone, the party was great and people were meeting each other. I had a boyfriend, 19, who was coming with some friends. It was late summer, so the weather was still mild, and most people were outside talking, laughing, and dancing. I had this middle school friend, let's call her Luna, who binge drank and threw up in the entrance of the cabin. She even hurt her foot, so she had some difficulties walking. At this point, I was drunk, but I wanted to help my friend. I asked if she wanted to be put to bed, and she said yes. I took her arm and guided her to my house. I live in a small village in the countryside, so it takes less than 5 minutes to get to my house. It was super safe. I used to wander alone in the streets late at night, 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. when I had insomnia, and nothing ever happened. It was pitch black. We were the only ones outside. As we walked, we saw a white SUV, but I didn't think much of it. I came home, gave her some water, and let her sleep in my room. I was alone with my sister that night. I warned her of the presence of my friend and headed back to the party. I was not walking straight since I was intoxicated. I saw the white SUV parked near the farm. As I continued walking, a black car stopped next to me and opened their windows. I looked at the man. I still don't know what age he was. It was so dark. He said to me, "I've seen this white SUV following you for a while. It seems dangerous. You should come into my car." I was drunk, but I directly felt like something was wrong. I just answered that I was okay and my friends were nearby. He insisted. He repeated to come to his car for my safety. My inner alarm went off as I was trying to walk faster and answered again that I was okay. Suddenly, I heard the car door open. He was not alone. I didn't think twice. I just ran for my life. I arrived quickly to the cabin. My friends were all drunk. One of my drunk male friends was complimenting Rose. They saw me come up in a hurry. The male friend looked at me and started to compliment me. I told him, "Man, someone just tried to abduct me." He stared at me and told me that I shouldn't have left alone, that it was not safe. The party lasted until 4 a.m. People who didn't drink took their cars and left. The few others were inside the cabin and started to talk. One of my boyfriend's friends was mad on their Snapchat group because he forgot the knife at the cabin. I told them about what happened and they were all spooked. After the event, I stopped walking in the village late at night, but I hosted a few other parties. I've never seen this man in his black car again. Most people keep telling me how great the party was. A couple who met at the party are still together, but I still wonder to this day what would have happened to me if I didn't react that spontaneously.